Follow this true life story of Barota. I wish it should not have happened, but to God be the glory in every situation you face in life. I do not wish anybody to go through this. I am Barota's older sister, and I have seen our family grow through both joy and hardship. We come from a modest town in our English-speaking African country, where traditions run deep and every family member matters. From our early days, I admired Barota's bright smile and kind heart. Even as children, we dreamed of a better life. I watched her study with determination and listened to stories of far-off lands, knowing one day she would seek a life beyond our small home. From a young age, Barota nurtured dreams of exploring the world. I remember gazing at the horizon with hope, imagining the adventures that awaited her. She saved every little bit she could and worked hard at school, determined to make her mark. Our family, though humble, always supported each other. I was proud to see her ambition shine, even though I worried about the challenges that might come with leaving everything we knew behind. When Barota received the opportunity to study abroad, our family was both excited and anxious. I recall the day she packed her bags, her eyes full of hope and a little fear of the unknown. She was leaving for Switzerland, a place so different from our home. The thought of her being far away in a cold, foreign land made me shiver, but I trusted her strong spirit and determination to succeed despite the distance. The journey to Switzerland marked the beginning of a new chapter in Barota's life. She left behind the warm comfort of home and our family's close embrace. In her letters, she spoke of strange customs, snowy days, and the bustling energy of a European city. Even though we missed her terribly, we knew that her path was set and that she would grow into the amazing woman we always believed she could be. In Switzerland, Barota quickly immersed herself in her studies and the local culture. I learned from her letters that life in the foreign land was challenging, yet she embraced every moment. She met many people from different walks of life, and slowly, her heart began to open to new experiences. Her strong will and gentle nature made her many friends, and I was proud to know she was learning so much about the world beyond our little town. Amid her studies, Barota met a Swiss man who captured her heart. Their friendship slowly turned into something more, and despite the cultural differences, they found common ground in kindness and understanding. I read her words filled with joy and nervous excitement, as she described the gentle smile and caring eyes of this man. Though I worried about the challenges of such a union, I trusted her judgment and hoped for her happiness. As time passed, Barota's relationship with her Swiss fiancé grew deeper and stronger. Her letters spoke of shared dinners, long walks through Swiss parks, and heartfelt conversations that crossed the language barrier. Their love was simple yet powerful, built on mutual respect and understanding. I was delighted for her, even though I knew that a love bridging two very different worlds could also invite many challenges and surprises along the way. One day, Barota revealed that she was pregnant. The news came as both a blessing and a shock. In her careful, simple words, she explained that she now carried a part of the man she loved. I could feel the mix of joy and worry in her tone, as she described the future ahead. I prayed for her strength, knowing that raising a child in a foreign land and planning a future together would test their resolve, yet also open a new chapter of hope and responsibility. With the baby on the way, Barota and her fiancé decided it was time to return to our homeland. They wished to present their unborn child and their love to our family and community before organizing a proper marriage. I remember the bittersweet feeling in my heart as I learned that she was coming back home, carrying both hope and the weight of change. It felt as if our family was about to enter a storm of new challenges, but also moments of joy we had never imagined before. The decision to return was not made lightly. Barota wanted to honor our traditions and have her family's blessing for the upcoming union. She believed that introducing her fiancé and soon-to-be husband to our community would create a bridge between two cultures. In her letters, she described the long journey back with a mix of excitement and nervousness. I could sense that this return meant not just a physical journey, but also a test of faith, love, and the courage to embrace change. When Barota, her fiancé, and their newborn son arrived in our country, our family was overwhelmed with mixed emotions. The moment they stepped off the plane, the warm embrace of home wrapped around them, and yet, I could feel the tension in the air. Many family members and community elders whispered about the union between an African woman and a Swiss man. Despite the excitement of a new life beginning, traditional views created an undercurrent of doubt and unease among some. I stood by the side of our family during the welcoming ceremony, my heart pounding with hope and worry. I saw Barota's eyes sparkle with relief and joy as she reunited with us, but I also sensed that this reunion would stir old beliefs and ignite new conflicts. The path ahead was uncertain, and while some celebrated her bravery, others remained skeptical about the cultural differences and the challenges of their future. I knew then that our family would soon face a trial of acceptance and understanding. In the weeks following their return, Barota began to introduce her fiancé to our close-knit family. I watched as she balanced two worlds, her traditional roots and the modern love that had blossomed abroad. At family gatherings, her fiancé tried his best to learn our customs and language, while Barota beamed with quiet pride at his efforts. Their love shone brightly, even as some relatives exchanged worried glances and whispered criticisms behind closed doors. Among our family, one name always stood out when discussing Barota's past and present, a name that meant much to her. That name was Monji, her childhood friend, whom she had always called her sister. Monji and Barota had grown up together, sharing secrets, laughter, and tears. I knew that Barota trusted Monji with all her heart, and the bond between them was unbreakable. Little did we know that this very trust would soon become the spark for unforeseen betrayal and heartbreak. Shortly after settling back home, Barota's fiancé expressed a desire to visit a famous seaside resort town in our country. He spoke of the beautiful beaches, clear blue waters, and the vibrant energy of the coastal community. While he was excited about showing his love for our homeland's natural beauty, Barota felt uneasy about the trip. She worried about leaving her newborn baby behind and the possibility of unforeseen problems arising during the journey. I remember Barota's anxious face as she explained her reluctance. She feared that the trip might expose vulnerabilities in their union, especially with the baby to care for. In her gentle but firm words, she told us that her heart was not ready to let go, even for a short time. Her protective instinct was strong, and she knew that every decision would impact not only her family but also our community's perception of this unusual union. The tension was building as we anticipated what might come next. As preparations for the seaside visit were discussed, Barota's junior brothers eagerly volunteered to accompany her fiancé on the trip. They saw it as an exciting adventure and an opportunity to explore a new part of our country. However, Barota was quick to object. She feared that her younger brothers, if left in the company of her fiancé, might end up asking for money or causing trouble, given the cultural differences and unfamiliar customs. Her concern was simple yet sincere. She wanted to protect both her family's dignity and her fiancé's pride. During one family meeting, Barota explained her worries in plain language. She mentioned that her brothers, though well-meaning, might not understand the delicate balance of expectations between our traditions and the modern ways her fiancé had adopted. I could see the hurt in her eyes as she insisted on keeping the trip free from any chance of exploitation or misunderstanding. It was clear that for her, this journey was not just a leisure trip, it was a matter of family honor and mutual respect, and she would not let anything come between that. Determined to resolve the issue without conflict, Barota made a difficult decision. Instead of allowing her junior brothers to join the trip, she decided that her longtime friend Monji would accompany her fiancé instead. In her mind, Monji was trustworthy and mature enough to handle the journey responsibly. I remember how she spoke about Monji with a mix of affection and deep trust, calling her a sister and relying on her judgment in times of uncertainty. It was a decision made out of love and caution, though it would later prove to be fateful. At that moment, I felt a strange mix of hope and foreboding. While I trusted Barotta's instincts, I could not shake off a nagging feeling that things might not go as planned. The idea of sending someone so close to her heart with her fiancé was both brave and risky. I tried to reassure myself that Barotta knew what she was doing, but deep inside, I worried about the hidden currents that sometimes lead to unforeseen betrayal. The stage was set for events that would change our family forever. The day of departure arrived, and Barotta's fiancé left for the seaside resort town with Monji. I watched from the threshold of our home, my heart heavy with mixed emotions. Barotta tried to smile bravely, but I saw the worry etched on her face as she clutched her baby close. The silence that fell over our household was thick with unspoken fears and questions about what might unfold during their trip. I prayed silently for their safety, hoping that nothing untoward would happen. In that quiet morning light, the gravity of the situation became clear. The absence of both Monji and her fiancé left a hollow space in our home and in Barotta's heart. Everyone around us sensed that this journey was more than a simple outing, it was a test of trust and love. As I helped Barotta settle her baby, I couldn't help but feel anxious about the consequences of her decision. Little did we know that this departure would soon lead to shocking revelations that would tear our family apart. Days passed slowly while we awaited news from the seaside. Barotta spent long hours pacing the corridors, her eyes always fixed on the horizon as if expecting a sign. I tried to comfort her, but even my words seemed to fall short of easing her deep-seated anxiety. The absence of any word from her fiancé and Monji created an air of suspense that gripped our entire household. Every passing hour seemed to stretch into an eternity, filled with uncertainty and dread. During one of those long days, a messenger finally arrived with news that chilled me to the bone. The message was brief and delivered in hushed tones, revealing that Monji had not returned with Barotta's fiancé as planned. Instead, there were whispers of a secret that had unfolded during the trip, a secret that would shatter the fragile trust that had held our family together. My heart pounded as I realized that something terrible had happened, and the simple hope for a peaceful journey was turning into a nightmare. The news spread quickly through our community and within our family. I listened in disbelief as word reached us that Barotta's fiancé had been seen with Monji in a way that betrayed their deep bond of trust. I felt an overwhelming sense of shock and sorrow for my beloved sister, who had always been so trusting and kind. The whispers turned into open conversations, and soon the entire household was gripped by a painful tension. It was as if our family's safe world had suddenly been invaded by betrayal and deceit. In the days that followed, I saw Barotta retreat into a shell of silence. Her once bright eyes became dull, and the warmth of her smile faded into a look of deep sorrow. I tried to reach out to her, offering comfort and words of encouragement, but the pain was too heavy for her to bear. Every glance from family members carried a mix of pity and anger. The community began to cast judgment, and I could see that the burden of betrayal was taking its toll on her fragile heart. As the shock settled in, our family was divided between anger and sorrow. Relatives and neighbors began to speak harshly about Barotta's trust in Monji, and I felt the sting of their words deeply. I remember sitting in the quiet of our family home, struggling to reconcile my love for my sister with the harsh reality of what had happened. Every conversation around me seemed to echo with blame and regret, and I wondered how such a deep betrayal could occur among those we held dear. In our home, the tension grew with every passing day. I could see the pain in Barotta's eyes as she struggled to understand how someone she considered like a sister could hurt her so profoundly. I tried to remind everyone that mistakes can happen and that forgiveness might one day heal the wounds, but the anger was too raw. It was as if the betrayal had cut a deep scar in our family, and every whispered word of blame and every accusing glance made the wound reopen again and again. In the midst of the chaos, I began to piece together small details of what had happened during that ill-fated trip. I talked quietly with trusted relatives who had heard the accounts from those who were present in the seaside resort town. The details were scattered, whispers of secret meetings, hurried papers signed in haste, and an unexpected departure back to Switzerland by both Monji and Barotta's fiancé. Each piece of information added to the heavy sense of betrayal that now hung over our family like a dark cloud. I felt a deep sorrow knowing that the trust we had placed in a beloved friend had been broken so thoroughly. It was not just a personal betrayal for Barotta, it was a wound that affected our entire community. I spent many nights awake, trying to understand how such a tragedy could have unfolded. My heart ached for my sister, and I could only hope that time would somehow bring healing, even though the scars of that betrayal seemed too deep to ever completely fade. The fallout from the betrayal was swift and painful. News spread that Monji and Barotta's fiancé had hurriedly made legal papers in Switzerland, formalizing a union that no one in our family had ever expected. I remember the day the official documents arrived. It was as if a final, crushing blow had been delivered to our already broken hearts. My sister, who had always been full of hope and light, now seemed lost in a sea of despair, unable to grasp the full extent of what had been done. Our family meetings turned into sessions of sorrow and anger. Relatives argued over who was to blame, and harsh words were exchanged about trust and betrayal. I tried to mediate, urging calm and understanding, but the wounds were too raw. Every day felt like a battle to hold on to our dignity and love for one another. I could see that Barotta's spirit was slowly being crushed by the weight of the scandal, and I vowed to do everything in my power to help her find her way back to the light. In the weeks that followed, the community's reaction grew louder. People whispered openly about how Barotta had trusted Monji with her family's honor, and their words cut deep. I heard neighbors and distant relatives make cruel jokes and snide remarks, as if the betrayal were a spectacle meant for public shame. It was painful to see our once respected family now reduced to subjects of ridicule, and the burden of their mockery weighed heavily on us all. I tried to shield Barotta from the worst of it, but I knew that the hurt would not easily fade. At home, the atmosphere was heavy with regret and sadness. Every corner of our house seemed to echo with the pain of broken trust. I sat with Barotta often, holding her hand and whispering words of comfort, even as tears streamed down her face. We talked in soft, broken voices about what had happened and whether we could ever forgive the betrayal. I could see the light in her eyes dimming with each passing day, and I prayed for the strength to help her heal from this deep, heart-wrenching wound. As the weeks turned into months, Barotta's emotional state began to deteriorate further. The shock of the betrayal had taken its toll, and she started to show signs of severe depression. I watched in despair as she withdrew from the family gatherings, her once vibrant personality now shrouded in silence and sorrow. Our parents, too, were deeply hurt, and disagreements began to arise over how best to handle the situation. The unity of our family was fracturing under the pressure of scandal and pain. I made countless attempts to reach out to her, to remind her of her strength and the love that still surrounded her, but the darkness seemed overwhelming. The community's harsh judgment, coupled with her internal turmoil, drove her to the brink. One day, in a moment of utter despair, she agreed to seek professional help. The decision to admit her to a psychiatric home was made with a heavy heart by our family, as we all hoped that with time and proper care, she would begin to heal and slowly find her way back to the person we all loved dearly. The day Barotta was admitted to the psychiatric home was one of the hardest days I have ever faced. I stood by her side as we said goodbye, my heart aching with a mix of sorrow and desperate hope. I promised her that our family would always be there to support her, even if the world outside seemed cold and unkind. In that sterile, quiet room, I could see the fragility of her spirit and knew that recovery would be a long, challenging journey. I clung to the belief that time and love could mend even the deepest wounds. In the weeks that followed, I visited her often, speaking softly and reading familiar stories from our childhood. I shared memories of happier times, hoping to remind her of her strength and the love that still surrounded her. Despite the clinical coldness of the facility, I tried to bring a bit of our home's warmth into her world. Each visit was a small victory, a reminder that she was not alone in her struggle. Yet, the shadow of betrayal still loomed large, and I knew that healing would take more than just kind words. It would require time, patience, and the gradual rebuilding of trust. As the months passed, the scandal began to take its toll on the relationships within our family and the wider community. Rumors and harsh accusations continued to circulate, and soon, the conflict spilled over into bitter disputes between our family and Monji's family. I witnessed heated arguments during family gatherings, where voices rose and old wounds were reopened. Every conversation seemed to circle back to the same hurtful subject, the betrayal that had shattered our trust and divided our hearts. The sense of unity we once shared had been replaced by suspicion and resentment. I tried to remain neutral, urging both sides to find forgiveness and understanding. It was a difficult task, as the pain of the betrayal ran deep and the wounds had not yet begun to heal. The accusations that Monji had given Bharat's fiancée a love potion and that he had fallen under a spell added a surreal twist to the story, making it even harder to separate fact from rumor. I could only watch in despair as both families suffered, and I prayed that time would eventually ease the bitterness and restore some semblance of peace among us all. In the midst of the turmoil, I began to reflect on the long journey that had brought us to this painful point. I remembered the days when Bharata was full of hope and ambition, eager to embrace the world and create a bright future. Now, that same hope had been shattered by betrayal and loss, and the weight of the scandal pressed heavily on our hearts. I kept a silent vigil, watching over our family and trying to find a way to mend the broken pieces, even as anger and sorrow seemed to consume every corner of our lives. I often wondered how a trusted friend could fall so far and cause such devastating pain. The reality that Monji, the person Bharata had called a sister, could be involved in such a betrayal was almost too much to bear. I struggled with feelings of anger, sadness, and confusion, all while trying to support Bharata through her darkest moments. It was a slow, painful process, one that required us to confront harsh truths and come to terms with the fact that sometimes, even the deepest bonds can break in unexpected ways. As the family conflict deepened, I noticed that even our neighbors began to take sides. The gossip in our town grew louder, and harsh judgments were passed with little regard for the pain we all endured. I walked through the streets and heard whispers of scandal and betrayal, each word fueling the fire of resentment. The once peaceful community now seemed divided, with people eager to point fingers and spread rumors about the affair that had upended our lives. The weight of public shame pressed down on us, making every day feel like a struggle for dignity. I did my best to shield Bharata from the worst of the public scrutiny, but it was difficult to escape the cruel stares and harsh comments. Our family dinners turned into tense affairs where even silence spoke volumes of the hurt and anger we all felt. I could see that every member of our family was deeply affected by the betrayal, and the sense of trust we had once taken for granted was now in tatters. In my heart, I hoped that time would heal our wounds and that forgiveness might one day replace the bitterness that now defined our daily lives. With the passage of time, I began to notice subtle changes in the way our family interacted. While the anger and hurt were still present, there were small signs that some healing might be possible. I watched as Bharata, though still fragile, started to open up during our quiet conversations at home. She would sometimes smile weakly at memories of better days, and I dared to hope that the light within her was not completely extinguished. Our parents, too, tried to mend the rift, urging everyone to put aside grudges for the sake of family unity. I made it my mission to support Bharata, visiting her as often as I could and sharing stories of our happier times. Every moment we spent together was a reminder that love and family could, in time, overcome even the deepest of betrayals. Yet, the hurt remained a constant undercurrent in our lives, and I knew that the road to recovery would be long and arduous. The community's judgment and the lingering anger toward Monji and her fiancé still cast shadows over our attempts at reconciliation, making every step toward healing a hard-fought battle. The scandal reached a turning point when legal papers arrived confirming that Monji and Barotta's fiancé had formalized the union in Switzerland. The news spread like wildfire, and with it came a fresh wave of shock and anger. I remember the day those papers were read aloud at a family gathering. Every word seemed to echo with finality. It felt as if our world had been irreparably altered, and the dream of a happy future for Barotta was now buried under a mountain of betrayal and heartache. I could see the raw pain in my sister's eyes as she listened to the details of the hurried arrangements. The realization that the person she had trusted like a sister had not only betrayed her but had also taken away her chance at love left her shattered. Our family tried to rally around her, but the hurt was deep, and words of comfort seemed to fall short. I held her close, wishing that I could take away her pain and restore the trust that had been so brutally broken. In that moment, it became clear that the scars of this betrayal would take much longer to heal than any of us had ever imagined. In the wake of the legal confirmation, tensions between our family and Monji's family began to escalate dramatically. Accusations flew like arrows as old wounds were reopened, and every conversation turned into a battleground of blame. I found myself caught in the middle, trying to understand how a bond of sisterhood could have dissolved into such bitter hostility. The constant arguments and harsh words left a bitter taste in everyone's mouth, and I felt the heavy burden of carrying secrets and sorrow that no one should ever have to bear. It was during one long, painful evening that I finally gathered the courage to speak up at a family meeting. I pleaded for calm and asked that we remember the love we once shared as a family before the betrayal tore us apart. My voice trembled as I asked for understanding, but my words were met with anger and bitterness. The chasm between our family and Monji's clan grew wider, and I realized that we were all trapped in a cycle of blame and regret. I prayed silently for a day when forgiveness might find its way into our hearts, even as the bitterness continued to fester. As the days turned into weeks, I began to notice that the pain of the betrayal was not just affecting Barotta, it was changing the very fabric of our family. I watched as my parents' eyes grew sadder and our home became a place filled with quiet resentment and sorrow. The community's harsh judgment added to the weight of our collective grief, and even small moments of joy were overshadowed by memories of the betrayal. I felt a deep responsibility to try to mend our broken bonds, even as I struggled to understand how we could ever move past such a painful event. Every conversation in our home now revolved around the scandal, and even the simplest family gatherings were tinged with bitterness. I found myself writing down my thoughts in a quiet journal, hoping that one day these words might help heal the wounds we all carried. I recalled the days when Barotta's laughter filled our home, and I longed for a return to those happier times. Yet, the harsh reality was that trust had been shattered, and rebuilding it would be a slow, painful process. I clung to the hope that time and compassion might eventually restore some sense of normalcy in our lives. One afternoon, while visiting our family's small compound, I overheard a heated conversation between relatives about the so-called love potion that Monji was accused of giving to Barotta's fiancé. The idea was absurd, yet in our grief-stricken state, such wild tales found fertile ground. The notion that he had fallen under a magical spell made everyone feel as if the betrayal were not entirely of this world, almost as if fate had played a cruel trick on us all. I could see the hurt and disbelief in their eyes, and I knew that the rumor only deepened our collective sense of betrayal. I tried to reason with those around me, reminding them that such fantastical stories only serve to distract from the painful truth. But the more I spoke, the more entrenched the wild tales became. It was as if our sorrow had given rise to a need for explanations, no matter how irrational they might seem. In that moment, I felt the heavy weight of our loss pressing down on me, and I wondered if we would ever be able to rid ourselves of these dark shadows that clung to our family's history. The aftermath of the scandal continued to ripple through our lives, and I could see the effects on every member of our family. Barota, once so full of life and ambition, now moved through the days in a quiet haze of sorrow and confusion. Our family gatherings were filled with awkward silences, as if everyone was too afraid to speak of the betrayal for fear of reopening old wounds. I watched helplessly as the community's judgment further isolated us, making it harder for any of us to find solace in our shared grief. During one of those long evenings, I sat with Barota and listened as she spoke haltingly about her feelings of betrayal and loss. Her voice was soft, and tears fell freely as she tried to make sense of how the person she trusted like a sister could have caused her so much pain. I held her hand and promised that I would always be there for her, no matter how difficult the road ahead might be. Even though the future seemed bleak and uncertain, I clung to the hope that love and time might eventually heal our broken hearts. In the months that followed, our family struggled to find a way forward. I took on extra responsibilities, trying to keep the household running as best I could while also offering support to Barota. Each day was a slow battle against the despair that threatened to overwhelm us all. I spent long nights thinking about the events that had led to our current state and wondering if there was any way to repair the shattered trust between us. It was a time of great sorrow and deep reflection, and every moment felt both endless and unbearably heavy. I also began to see the impact of the scandal on the community. Old friends who once greeted us with warm smiles now looked at us with pity or disdain. The rumor of the love potion and the betrayal had tarnished our family's name, and I felt a growing sense of urgency to restore what had been lost. I promised myself that I would do everything in my power to help Barota find her way back to happiness, even if it meant confronting the painful memories of that dark time. The journey to healing had only just begun, and I knew it would be a long, arduous road. One day, news came that Barota's fiancé had decided to return to Switzerland permanently. The announcement was like a final exclamation point in the tragic saga that had torn our family apart. I remember the shock I felt when I first heard it. It was as if a part of our collective soul had been ripped away. For Barota, the man she had once loved had become a symbol of betrayal and heartbreak, a reminder of trust broken and dreams lost. Our family was left to pick up the pieces, and the pain of his departure lingered in the air like a heavy fog. The news added another layer of grief to our already burdened hearts. I could see that Barota's spirit was even more fragile now, and I worried that the loss would push her deeper into despair. In our quiet conversations, she spoke of feeling abandoned and hurt, and I could only offer my support and love. I knew that while the physical distance might someday heal some wounds, the emotional scars of this betrayal would take much longer to fade. The departure marked not an end, but rather a painful new beginning that none of us had ever wanted. As the days passed after his departure, our community began to take sides in the unfolding drama. Some people sympathized with Barota, praising her for her strength in the face of betrayal, while others were quick to criticize her for trusting someone who had caused so much pain. I watched as former friends became distant and even hostile, their judgment fueled by gossip and old prejudices. The once unified community now felt fractured, and every public gathering was tinged with whispers and stares that made us feel like outcasts. I tried to remind everyone that Barota was still our sister, a person who had faced unimaginable heartbreak. Yet, the public opinion was harsh, and the comments of outsiders only deepened our internal struggles. It was painful to see how quickly trust could be shattered by rumors and scandal. I clung to the belief that, over time, the truth of our family's love and resilience would shine through the darkness. Even as the community's judgment rained down on us, I held on to the hope that healing, though slow, was still possible. Family gatherings became somber events filled with unspoken tension and sorrow. I could feel the weight of every disappointed glance and every harsh conversation as relatives discussed the scandal in low, bitter tones. Our once lively home now seemed to echo with memories of better times that felt increasingly distant. I did my best to maintain a sense of normalcy, cooking meals, and sharing stories of our childhood, but the shadow of betrayal loomed large over every conversation. It was as if the past had seeped into every corner of our lives, making it hard to move forward. I sat with Barata during one such gathering, watching as she tried to force a smile despite the tears that threatened to spill. I could see the effort it took for her to join in the conversation, her voice barely rising above a whisper as she spoke of her hopes for the future. I wished I could take away her pain and restore the happiness we once knew, but I also understood that some wounds take time to heal. That evening, as I left the gathering, I vowed to keep fighting for our family's unity, even as the storm of scandal and heartache continued to rage around us. Slowly, after many long months of pain and isolation, Barata began to show signs of recovery. I noticed small moments of brightness in her eyes when she talked about memories of our childhood, or when she mentioned her dreams for the future. It was as if, deep within her, the spark of hope was being gently rekindled. I spent every spare moment by her side, offering comfort, sharing laughter, and sometimes simply sitting in silence together. I knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but I also believed that love and time could help mend the shattered pieces of her heart. Even as our family struggled with the ongoing fallout of the scandal, there were small victories that gave us hope. A kind word from a neighbor, a letter from a distant relative expressing support, and even the occasional smile from Barata reminded us that we were not entirely lost to despair. I took these moments to heart, cherishing every sign that she was slowly emerging from the darkness of depression. It was a fragile recovery, one that required constant nurturing and love, but it was a start, a sign that even the deepest wounds could, with care and time, begin to heal. During one of my many visits to Barata at the psychiatric home, I sat with her and listened to her softly recount her feelings. She spoke of the unbearable loneliness, the crushing betrayal, and the overwhelming sense of abandonment. Her words were simple and raw, filled with a deep sadness that cut right to the heart. I held her hand tightly, promising her that our family would always be there for her, no matter how dark the days might seem. I told her that she was still the brave, loving sister I had always known, even though the world had been unkind to her. I explained that the scandal did not define her, and that one day, the truth of her strength would shine through the pain. I shared memories of our childhood, of simpler times when love and laughter were all that mattered. Even though she struggled to see it, I hoped that these gentle reminders would help her piece together the fragments of her broken heart. I promised to stand by her side, to help rebuild the trust that had been shattered, and to remind her that, despite everything, she was never alone in her journey toward healing. As Barata slowly emerged from the depths of depression, our family began to feel a cautious sense of hope. I noticed that, with each passing day, she grew a little stronger and a bit more determined to reclaim her life. Our interactions became lighter, and I could see the faint glimmer of her old self returning in the way she smiled at little joys, a warm cup of tea, the sound of birds in the morning, or a gentle reminder of our shared past. These moments, though small, were victories in our long battle against despair. I continued to visit her regularly, and together we began to forge new routines. We spent hours talking about our dreams, our regrets, and our hopes for a future free from the pain of betrayal. I could sense that she was beginning to understand that her worth was not defined by the mistakes of others. Though the scars of betrayal would remain for a long time, I was determined to help her build a life where trust and love could slowly, ever so gently, begin to blossom again. Despite the growing sense of hope, the wounds inflicted by the scandal still bled fresh in quiet moments. I often found myself reflecting on the bitter irony of how someone so dear to Barata could become the source of such deep pain. The betrayal had not only affected her, but it had also cast a long shadow over our entire family. I spent many sleepless nights wondering if the scars would ever fade, and if our family could ever fully mend the broken trust that had been so callously shattered. Every day felt like a struggle between clinging to the past and trying to move forward into an uncertain future. Yet, amidst the lingering pain, there were signs that we were slowly beginning to heal. Conversations around the dinner table started to include not just complaints and sorrow, but also memories of laughter and better times. I encouraged every family member to speak honestly about their feelings, and though the process was painful, it was also necessary. I believed that by facing the truth together, we could eventually find a way to forgive and rebuild our bonds. The road ahead was long, but every small step was a reminder that healing, though slow, was indeed possible. As the months continued to pass, the relentless gossip and judgment from the community began to ease, replaced gradually by a more reflective silence. I observed that some of our neighbors had started to offer kind words and quiet support, even if only in passing. These small gestures of empathy reminded us that not everyone was blinded by the scandal, and that, perhaps, time was slowly softening even the hardest hearts. In the midst of our personal pain, I began to see glimmers of understanding among those who once had judged us harshly. At home, our family started to rebuild its sense of unity through shared experiences. We organized small gatherings where old stories were retold, and laughter, though tentative, began to resurface. I made it my mission to foster an environment of open communication and forgiveness, even as we continued to grapple with the lasting effects of betrayal. I often found myself leading by example, hoping that our actions would eventually speak louder than the hurtful words of the past. Slowly, we began to understand that healing was a process, a journey that required patience, compassion, and, above all, a commitment to moving forward together. Amid the ongoing efforts to mend our family, more details about the affair began to emerge from those who had been present during the fateful seaside trip. The fragments of information painted a picture of a moment when temptation and opportunity led to a decision that would forever change our lives. I listened intently as older relatives recounted what they had heard from trusted sources, stories that were as painful as they were shocking. It seemed that every time the details were discussed, fresh wounds opened in our already fragile hearts. The bitterness of betrayal was now intertwined with disbelief and sorrow. I struggled to reconcile the image of the man my sister once trusted with the reality of his actions. The discussions, though hushed, were relentless, and I found myself questioning how such a profound betrayal could have occurred in the midst of what should have been a joyous reunion. Even as I listened to these accounts, I remained determined to shield Barata from the full brunt of the painful details. I focused instead on helping her rebuild her sense of self, reminding her that the actions of others did not diminish her worth or the love we still held for her as a family. In time, the reasons behind Barata's fiancé's actions began to surface. Some said he had felt isolated and overwhelmed by cultural differences, while others whispered that he had been swayed by the allure of something forbidden. I recall sitting with a few trusted family members as we tried to piece together his motivations, trying to understand a mind that had made such a devastating choice. The more we talked, the more we realized that the betrayal was not simply a matter of personal failing, it was a complex interplay of loneliness, temptation, and miscommunication between two very different worlds. Although we never found a clear answer that could fully justify his actions, the discussions opened our eyes to the complexities of human emotions. I learned that sometimes, even those who seem strong and confident are vulnerable to forces beyond their control. While this understanding did little to lessen our pain, it did provide a small measure of insight into the tangled web of love and betrayal. I held on to the hope that, with time, all the pieces would come together in a way that might help us all learn and grow, even in the face of such a painful chapter in our lives. Around this time, I began to notice subtle changes in how some in our community started to speak of the affair. Though harsh words were still exchanged, there was also a growing sense of empathy for Barata's suffering. People began to realize that her pain was not entirely of her own making, and that sometimes, the heart makes decisions that defy logic. I saw individuals who had once joined in the mockery now offering gentle words of support, trying to help mend the rift that had torn our family apart. It was a small but hopeful sign that time might indeed heal some of the deepest wounds. I felt a renewed sense of responsibility to be a voice of compassion in these troubled times. I spoke with neighbors, urging them to look beyond the scandal and see the human cost of the betrayal. Every kind word, every act of empathy, reminded me that forgiveness was a slow, deliberate process, one that required understanding and patience from all involved. While the scars of the past would not vanish overnight, I believed that these small acts of kindness could lay the groundwork for a more forgiving and united future. In the midst of this turbulent period, I often found myself recalling the early days of our childhood, when Barata and I were inseparable. Those memories were a source of comfort amid the chaos, a reminder of a time when love and trust flowed freely without the burden of betrayal. I remembered how she used to laugh freely in the sunshine, how we would run through fields and share secrets under starlit skies. Those simple, joyful moments seemed so far away now, buried under the weight of recent events. Yet, I clung to those memories, believing that they held the key to eventually reclaiming the light in her heart. I made it a point to share these cherished memories with Barata whenever I could, gently reminding her of the strength and beauty that had always defined her. In quiet moments, I would whisper stories of our childhood and the times when the world seemed full of promise. I hoped that by reconnecting with her past, she could find the courage to face the present and rebuild her sense of self. Though the path to healing was steep and fraught with lingering doubts, I believed that love, both the love we shared as a family and the love she once felt for life, would eventually guide her back to happiness. One day, our family gathered for a long overdue meeting in an attempt to address the growing rift between us and to find a way to move forward. I sat among relatives, my heart heavy with worry as we discussed the painful events that had divided us. Emotions ran high as we recounted the scandal, each person offering their own perspective on the betrayal and its impact on our lives. It was a difficult conversation filled with anger, sorrow, and a desperate longing for reconciliation. We all recognized that the wounds ran deep, and that healing would not come easily. I spoke softly, urging everyone to consider forgiveness and understanding over endless blame. I reminded them that our family's strength had always been our unity, and that even in the darkest times, love had the power to mend broken bonds. Though my words were met with both nods and tears, I sensed that some small seeds of hope were being sown. It was a fragile beginning, but I held on to the belief that if we could set aside our pride and open our hearts, we might find a way to rebuild the trust that had been lost. In the weeks that followed our family meeting, I began to see subtle shifts in the way some of our relatives interacted with one another. While the pain of betrayal still lingered, there were moments of gentle smiles and tentative gestures of reconciliation. I noticed that even those who had been most bitter were softening, as if they too longed to move past the sorrow and embrace a future of forgiveness. It was a slow process, but every small step felt like a victory in the battle against despair and division. I made it my daily mission to encourage open conversations and to listen to the hearts of those around me. I would sit with each family member, sharing memories of happier times and quietly urging them to see that our bond was stronger than any scandal. Through these interactions, I began to feel a cautious sense of unity re-emerging. Though the wounds were still fresh, I believed that by working together and offering each other compassion, we could eventually heal and rebuild our family's broken trust. During one particularly emotional evening, our family matriarch, a wise and gentle soul who had always been the pillar of our home, gathered us together for a heartfelt talk. Her calm, measured words cut through the tension as she spoke of the importance of forgiveness and unity. She reminded us that while betrayal had left deep scars, it was the love we shared that had always defined us. With a steady voice and kind eyes, she urged us to let go of the bitterness and to focus instead on the future we could still build together. Her words resonated deeply with me, and I felt a renewed hope that maybe, just maybe, our family could find peace again. I watched as her gentle wisdom began to ease some of the anger and hurt that had gripped our hearts. The harsh words and accusing stares softened into understanding glances, and for a moment, I believed that we were on the path to healing. Her message was simple, that love and forgiveness were stronger than the forces that had torn us apart. I left that meeting with a determined resolve to support Barota and every member of our family as we tried to rebuild what had been lost. It was a turning point, a small, hopeful step toward a future where we could all learn to trust again. Despite the progress we had made, the community continued to mock our family and whisper cruel things about Barota. The weight of public judgment was a constant reminder of the betrayal that had shattered our lives. I walked through our town and heard snide remarks and harsh laughter whenever her name was mentioned. It hurt deeply to know that people who once respected our family now saw us as a cautionary tale, a warning of what happens when trust is broken. The stares and whispers felt like sharp needles, each one a painful reminder of our loss. I tried to shield Barota as much as possible from the community's cruelty, but it was nearly impossible. Every gathering, every market visit, was laced with unkind looks and judgmental comments. I would gently take her hand and whisper words of reassurance, reminding her that her worth was not defined by the cruelty of strangers. I wished that one day, the community would come to understand the true complexity of our pain, and that with time, they might learn to show compassion instead of scorn. Until then, I resolved to stand by my sister and protect her heart as best I could. The continued pressure and isolation eventually pushed Barota to seek further help. After months of struggling with overwhelming sadness, she agreed to additional therapy sessions and more intensive care at the psychiatric home. I remember the day she left for her regular sessions. It was a quiet, painful departure, and I could see the fear in her eyes. Despite the heaviness of the moment, I knew that these steps were necessary for her to begin the long process of healing. I stayed by her side, offering every ounce of support I could muster, and praying that this path would eventually lead her back to hope. During those visits, I saw her slowly begin to share her feelings, speaking in quiet, halting sentences about the betrayal, the shame, and the deep hurt that had taken root in her heart. It was as if each word released a little of the pain that had been locked away inside her. I listened carefully, offering gentle reassurances and reminding her that she was not alone in her journey. I believed that through consistent care and the love of our family, she could someday rise above the darkness that had so nearly consumed her. As Barota gradually recovered from her deep depression, I began to feel a cautious optimism blossom within me. There were days when she smiled for the first time in months, and moments when her laughter, though soft and tentative, filled our home once again. I cherished those small victories, understanding that healing was a slow and fragile process. I continued to support her every step of the way, visiting frequently, sharing stories of our childhood, and encouraging her to take each day as it came. Her strength, though battered, was slowly returning, and with it, a glimmer of the hope we had all been desperately waiting for. In the quiet moments of our recovery, I also noticed a subtle shift in the attitudes of some in our community. A few kind souls began to reach out with words of encouragement, and the harsh judgment we once faced started to wane, replaced by tentative sympathy. Although the scars of betrayal remained, I felt that both Barota and our family were slowly reclaiming our dignity. Every day was a new chance to rebuild, and I held on to the belief that with time, love and forgiveness would eventually prevail over the bitterness of the past. As the healing process continued, our family slowly began to repair the deep divisions that had split us apart. I organized small gatherings where we could share our feelings openly, and I encouraged each member to speak honestly about the pain they had endured. These sessions, though difficult, became the foundation for a gradual return to unity. I saw that even the harshest words of judgment could be softened by empathy and understanding, and that our collective grief could eventually transform into a source of strength. We were determined to reclaim our identity, to show that love, though scarred, was resilient and enduring. I also reached out to those in the community who had been kind during our darkest times. Their support, though modest, reminded me that not everyone was consumed by bitterness. It was a slow, deliberate process of mending relationships and rebuilding trust, but with every shared smile and every sincere apology, our family began to feel whole again. I clung to the hope that one day, the pain of betrayal would be replaced by the warmth of forgiveness, and that Barota's brave journey toward healing would serve as an inspiration for all of us. Looking back on the painful events that had shattered our family, I found myself reflecting on the lessons that had been learned through so much sorrow and loss. I remembered the bright-eyed girl Barota once was, the one who dreamed of studying abroad and forging a future filled with promise, and I realized that even in the darkest times, that same spirit still flickered within her. The betrayal, the public scorn, and the long journey through depression had left deep scars, but they had also taught us the value of trust, resilience, and the power of forgiveness. I often thought of those moments as the crucible in which our true strength was forged. In my quiet moments, I vowed to never let the bitterness of the past overshadow the hope for a better future. Our family had been through so much, yet I believed that we could emerge stronger and more united than before. I held on to the memory of Barota's courage in the face of overwhelming odds, and I promised myself that I would always be there for her, no matter how long it took for the wounds to heal. Even as the echoes of betrayal faded into the background, the lessons we learned would remain, guiding us toward a future defined by love and understanding. Now, as I sit and reflect on all that has transpired, I see the slow but steady light of hope emerging from the darkness that once enveloped our lives. Barota, though forever changed by the betrayal, has begun to find her strength again. Our family has endured pain and division, but we have also rediscovered the bonds that tie us together. In the aftermath of heartbreak, I have learned that forgiveness is not a sign of weakness, but a necessary step toward healing. The journey has been long, and the scars remain, yet there is beauty in our resilience and in the promise of a new beginning. I share this story with a heavy heart but also with hope for the future. It is a tale of love, betrayal, and ultimately, redemption, a testament to the human spirit's capacity to endure even the harshest trials. May our story serve as a reminder that even in the face of deep sorrow, love can eventually prevail, and the bonds of family can be mended, one day at a time. I remain forever committed to my sister and our family, and I trust that, with time, the wounds will heal and a brighter, more forgiving future will emerge. Dive into the gripping tale of Barota, a brave African woman who defied expectations, faced betrayal, and ultimately found redemption. Join the conversation, share your thoughts, and let this real-life story of love, loss, and healing inspire you. Click now to watch the full journey and be part of the discussion. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to our channel for more.